Welcome to the lesson on the LCM and the GCF. LCM and GCF, of course, stand for something else, as many of these abbreviations and text language do. GCF stands for the greatest common factor. And a factor, we first have to understand. So a factor is the two parts of a product. Well, product is multiplication. So, for example, since 6 times 2 is equal to 12, then 6 and 2 are factors of 12. But we want to have a way to find the factors so we don't miss any, so we're going to work on that throughout this lesson. Then we're going to look now at what is a common factor. What are the common factors of 12 and 24, for example? First, we have to find the factors of 12. Now remember, factors are two numbers that multiply together to give us 12. Or we can find them by thinking of what numbers can be divided into 12 evenly with no remainder, or 12 divided by what numbers gives us another whole number. And one way we can do that is we always can start off with the factors of 1 times the number, because that is always two of the factors, 1 and the number itself. Also, then we can think about the number 2. Well, if you're not sure if 2 is a factor of 12, take your calculator, plug in 12, and divide it by 2. Well, if I take 12 and divide it by 2, I get the whole number 6. So 2 and 6 are factors of 12. Then I can try the number 3. 12 divided by 3 on a calculator gives me the whole number 4. So 3 times 4, that's the other set of factors of 12. I want to keep doing this in order, 1, 2, 3. The next number I would try is 4, but it's already listed on our factors. I could then keep trying numbers if I wanted to. But if you will look right here at the last two factors we found, 3 and 4, there are no whole numbers between 3 and 4, so we're finished with finding our factors. Let's look at that for the factors of 24. Again, we're going to begin with 1 times 24. Then on a calculator, I'll take 24 and divide it by 2. Well, yes, that gives me a whole number, 12. So 2 and 12 are factors of 24. Then I can try the number 3. 24 divided by 3 is 8. So 3 and 8 are also factors of 24. Then I can try the number 4. 24 divided by 4 is the whole number 6. So 4 and 6 are also factors of 24. There's only one more number between 4 and 6 here, where it is the last pair of factors that I got. So the only other number I need to try is 5. Well, 24 divided by 5 does not give me a whole number answer. It gives me a decimal answer. So 5 is not a factor of 24. So what numbers are factors of both 12 and 24? Well, 1 is a factor of both numbers. 2 is a factor of both numbers. 3 is a factor of both numbers. 4 is a factor of both numbers. 6 is a factor of both numbers. And 12 is a factor of both numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12 are common factors between those two numbers. Then the greatest common factor then is simply the largest factor that the two numbers have in common. So again, let's go through finding the factors process for the numbers 20 and 35. So starting with 20, again, always know that 1 and the number are factors. Then I can take 20 and now divide it by the number 2, and yes, on a calculator, 20 divided by 2 gives me the whole number 10, so those are factors. Then I can try 20 divided by 3. Put that in a calculator? No, that gives me a decimal answer. Then I can try 20 divided by 4. Yes, 20 divided by 4 is 5. And remember I told you to watch this. There's no other integers between 4 and 5, so that's our last factor. Then 35. 1 times 35. 35 is not an even number, so if you'll remember that it has to be an even number to divide evenly by 2, I'm going to get a decimal answer if I do 35 divided by 2. 35 divided by 3 gives me a decimal answer. 35 divided by 4 gives me a decimal answer. 35 divided by 5 gives me a whole number 7. Again, I can put all that in the calculator looking for whole number answers when I divide 35 by 1, then divide it by 2, then try 3, then try 4, then try 5. And notice, again, between 5 and 7, the only other whole number between those two is 6. And 35 divided by 6 gives me a decimal. So this is all the factors of 35. So I know I'm through when I get two numbers so close together, there's either no more whole numbers between them or the whole numbers between the two factors do not work. So I look for what they have in common. So what they have in common is a 1 and a 5. So since they have in common a 1 and a 5, the greater of those is 5, so the GCF is 5. How about a least common multiple? A multiple is a number multiplied by an integer. So here are some multiples of 3. 3 times 1 is 3, so 3 is a multiple of 3. 3 times 2 is 6, so 6 is a multiple of 3. And 3 times 3 is 9, so 9 is a multiple of 3. I could keep doing that. 3 times 4, that's 12. 3 times 5, that's 15. So all of these are multiples of 3. You can also think of it as counting by 3s. Counting by 3s, I get 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, etc. And the multiples keep going on forever and ever and ever. So that's a multiple and takes care of that word. Common multiples are multiples that are shared by two different numbers. So again, let's do 4s. So I'm going to count by 4s, or I'm going to think about my 4s on my multiplication table, or I'm going to think of it like this. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3 is 12. 4 times 4 is 16, and I can continue this process. And here are some multiples of 4. Now and I'm going to keep going just a little bit more. And that's going to keep going on forever and ever and ever. So 8, we're going to think of multiples of 8. So we're going to count by 8. So think about our 8 multiplication tables. 8 times 1 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. Then we would have 24. So that's 8 times 3. 8 times 4 is 32. 8 times 5 is 40. 8 times 6 is 48, and we go on from there. So if we look here, we're going to find some common multiples. Well, I see 8's on the list. That's a common multiple. 16's on the list. That's another common multiple. 24 is a common multiple. 32 is a common multiple. 40 is a common multiple. And we could keep going on and on and on and doing this process, and there'll be thousands and thousands of multiples that they have in common. But what we are interested in is the least common multiple between two numbers. So let's do some counting by nines, or our nines on a multiplication table. 9 times 1 is 9. 9 times 2 is 18. 9 times 3 is 27. 9 times 4 is 36. 9 times 5 is 45. And then we could keep going if we wanted to. 12, we have 12. 12 times 1 is 12. 12 times 2 is 24. 12 times 3 is 36. And I can stop right there because that's the first multiple they had in common. So it is the least common multiple. So the LCM of these two numbers is 36. A multiple is either going to be equal to or higher than the two numbers. So the multiple of 9 is either got to be 9 or higher. A multiple of 12 has got to be 12 or higher. So the least common multiple is going to be higher than 12, or 12 itself. It can be 12 or higher. So we want to look for least common multiple are going to be larger than the two numbers. That greatest common factor is going to be the number or smaller. But you'll see what we mean as we look through these. So I'm going to show you a process to find the GCF and the LCM. And actually, this is the first time I've used this method, but I thought it was pretty good, so decided to use it. So first we're going to start with 12. And we are going to take the number 12, and we're going to list the factors. So we're going to start with 1 times 12, and then we're going to take a calculator and say, what's 12 divided by 2? Well, that's the whole number 6. So that's also a factor. Then we're going to take 12 and divide it by 3, and that's 4. And remember, there's no whole numbers between 3 and 4, so we can stop. Okay, we're going to look at 20. And for 20, our factors are 1 and 20. 20 divided by 2 is the whole number 10. 20 divided by 3 gives me a decimal. 20 divided by 4 gives me 5. And again, there's no whole numbers between 4 and 5. So first we look at what factors they have in common. So, of course, they have 1 in common and 2 in common. And they have 4 in common. So their greatest, oops, sorry about that. That jumped ahead. So the greatest common factor is 4. Now I have used that before, but this next thing I'm showing you how to find the LCM, or the least common multiple. I had never really used this method before. But how you find the least common multiple is you take your GCF, which is 4, and we multiply that by something to find the LCM. And this is what we multiply by. Since our GCF was 4, we come over here to our factors, and in 12, 3 is paired with 4. And in 20, 5 is paired with 4. So 3 is paired with the 4, and 5 is paired with the 4. So to find the least common multiple, we take our GCF and we multiply it by what was paired with the 4 in the first number times what was paired with 4 in our second number. So we take our GCF times what was paired with it in our first number, 12, times what was paired with it in our second number, 20. And then we can multiply those together, and that gives our least common multiple. So 4 times 3 times 5, you can put that all in a calculator. It comes out to be 60. So that is our LCM. So I thought that was pretty cool that you could take your GCF and the two paired pieces, multiply it all together, and that gives you your least common multiple. Then we're not sitting there all day listing out multiples, because they could get pretty big if we had to keep doing that. Let's try another example. We have 14 and 30. So 14, we can have the factor pair. 1 times 14. 14 divided by 2 is the whole number, 7. 14 divided by 3 gives me a decimal. 14 divided by 4 gives me a decimal. 14 divided by 5 gives me a decimal. And 14 divided by 6 gives me a decimal. There's nothing else between 2 and 7, so I'm finished. Now for 30. We have 1 times 30. Then 30 divided by 2 is the whole number, 15. 30 divided by 3 is the whole number, 10. 30 divided by 4 is a decimal. And 30 divided by 5 is 6. And there's no whole numbers between 5 and 6, so I'm done. So what are their common factors? 1 is a common factor. And 2 is a common factor. And so there's no other common factors, so our greatest common factor is 2. So to find our least common multiple, we use the GCF of 2, and we look and say, with the number 14, what was paired with the 2 was a 7. And we look at this one, and what was paired with the 2 is a 15. And we multiply 2 times 7 times 15, and that's 210, which is our least common multiple for those two numbers. Okay, so let's go to the next example of 18 and 27. So we take 18, and we can do 1 times 18. We know we can always do 1 times a number. 18 divided by 2 is 9. 18 divided by 3 is 6. The only numbers between 3 and 6 that are whole numbers are 4 and 5. And 18 divided by 4 is a decimal. And 18 divided by 5 is a decimal. So we're finished. 27 is 1 times 27. Take 27 and divide it by 2. Well, it's not an even number, so that's going to give us a decimal. 27 divided by 3 is 9. 27 divided by 4, and 5, and 6, and 7, and 8. If you try all those numbers between 3 and 9, all of them are going to give you decimals. So these are our only factors. So we look for the common factors. 1 is a common factor. 3 is a common factor. And 9 is a common factor. So our greatest common factor is 9. Then we see what was paired with the 9 for the LCM. We take the GCF times what was paired with this 9? A 3. What was paired with this 9? The 2. So 9 times 3 times 2 is 54. So that is our LCM. Our last example is 8 and 45. So for the number 8, we're going to have 1 and 8 as common factors. Then 8 divided by 2 is the whole number 4. The only thing between 2 and 4 is a 3, and 8 divided by 3 is a decimal. 45. We have 1 and 45. Then we take 45 and divide it by 2. Well, it's not an even number, so it's going to give us a decimal. 45 divided by 3 is 15. Then if I try 45 divided by 4, I get a decimal. 45 divided by 5 gives me 9. 45 divided by 6 is a decimal. 45 divided by 7 is a decimal. And 45 divided by 8 is a decimal. And then we're back up to 9. So the only numbers between 5 and 9 are 6, 7, and 8, and they all give you decimals when you take 45 and divide them. So then we look for our common factors. So our common factors, only thing they have in common is 1. So their GCF is 1. So I wanted to show you that it's okay to have 1 as a GCF. Then what is paired with a GCF? And with the 1 here, we have paired with an 8. And the 1 here is paired with a 45. So our least common multiple is going to be 1 times 8 times the 45. So we can still use the same process. Our GCF is 1, which is okay. And then when we multiply those together, I'm going to have to do that, so I don't have my calculator. So let me do 45 times 8, 0, and that's 40. You can use a calculator though, that's fine. And then that's 32, and 4 more is 36. So my LCM is 360, because then if I multiply that by 1, I still get 360. I know that was a lot of information for today, but now you'll get a chance to practice practice finding the GCF and the LCM.